When police broke down the door, the smell hit them first. Rot, mixed with incense. Then they saw her, an elderly woman standing in the doorway, smiling. In her hands, 2 thick wooden drumsticks. Not the kind from a restaurant. These were Tao drumsticks, traditional Japanese drumming batons, thick as table legs. And they were crusted with something dark, dried, flaking. Blood, tissue, fragments of bone. Inside her house, 6 rotting corpses. 6 people beaten to death with those drumsticks, while she claimed to be God. And her followers, they'd helped her do it. While drums pounded through the night, day after day, month after month. The neighbors heard the drums, the rhythmic beating, the chanting. They just thought she was religious. They had no idea what the drums were really being used for. July 5th, 1995. Sukagawa, Japan. Police had received a tip about a spiritual healer whose exorcisms had sent someone to the hospital. When they arrived at Sachiko Etto's house, they could hear drums, deep, rhythmic pounding coming from inside. The same sound neighbors had been hearing for months, day and night, never stopping. But when police knocked, the drums stopped. Silence. Then footsteps. The door opened, and there she was. Sachiko Etto, 48 years old, unremarkable looking, gray hair, ordinary clothes, holding 2 Tao drumsticks. Wooden batons designed to strike traditional Japanese drums, but these hadn't been used on drums. The wood was stained dark brown, crusted, flaking. Police asked to come inside. She stepped aside, still smiling. The smell hit them immediately. Sweet decay, rot mixed with burning incense. The kind of smell that gets into your throat and stays there. One officer asked what the smell was. Demons, Sachiko said, leaving the possessed. They searched the house. 6 bodies, in various stages of decomposition. Some had been dead for months, flesh rotting, bones exposed, maggots everywhere. Others more recent, days old, still recognizable as human. All of them showed the same injuries: fractured skulls, broken ribs, shattered bones, internal bleeding, organ damage. And everywhere, on the walls, the floors, the furniture, traces of blood. The drums were there too. Traditional Tao drums, large, beautiful. But they hadn't been played in months, because Sachiko had found a different use for the drumsticks. Police asked her what happened. Exorcisms, she said. They were possessed by demons. I drove the demons out. By beating them to death? By purifying their souls. She wasn't defensive, wasn't panicked, wasn't afraid. She was calm, proud even, because as far as Sachiko Etto was concerned, she hadn't done anything wrong. She'd saved their souls. And the worst part? Some of her followers still believed her. They'd been living in that house, with the bodies, with the smell, for months, while the drums pounded through the night. 6 people died in Sachiko Etto's house. This is who they were. Mamoru Miki, 50 years old, a father, a husband. He'd injured his back at work. The pain was constant. Medical treatments weren't helping. Someone told him about a spiritual healer who could cure anything through divine power. He brought his wife, Kazuko, 48, and their daughter, Satoy Miki, just 18 years old. Satoy had just graduated high school. She had her whole life ahead of her: college,
career, marriage, children. She came with her parents seeking healing for her father's back pain. Instead, she spent her final days in agony. December 1994, Sachiko declared that all 3 members of the Miki family were possessed. The exorcisms began. At first, they were just chanting, rituals, the rhythmic pounding of drums filling the house. But Sachiko said the demons were strong, resistant. She needed to beat them out. The drumsticks that were supposed to strike instruments started striking flesh instead. Mamoru was beaten first, for hours, the thick wooden sticks breaking his ribs, fracturing his skull, rupturing organs. His wife Kazuko watched, forced to believe this was necessary, that her husband's screams meant the demons were leaving. Then it was her turn. Satoy watched both her parents die. She was 18 years old, terrified, begging for mercy. "Please, I'll do anything. Please stop." Sachiko just smiled. "The demon speaks through you. We must continue." Satoy Miki died, hearing her own screams echo through the house. Died believing somehow it was her fault, that if she'd just been pure enough, the demons would have left. Her body was left to rot in a room where other followers still lived, still prayed, still believed. Kimiko Sakin, 46 years old, Kazuko's sister. When she came looking for her sister, Sachiko declared her possessed too. She died the same way, beaten, broken, discarded. Tatsuo 42 years old, a follower who'd given Sachiko everything he had, until he had nothing left to give. Then Sachiko found a demon in him. Akimi Senzaki, only 27 years old. She made a fatal mistake. She looked at Sachiko's young lover with too much interest. Jealousy isn't usually a demonic possession, but in Sachiko's world, it was. "A bad fox spirit has entered her," Sachiko declared. The beating lasted days. When Akimi finally stopped breathing, Sachiko moved on to the next victim without a second thought. 6 people, 6 lives, 6 families destroyed. And through it all, drums pounded in the background. A constant rhythm, day and night, never stopping. The soundtrack to hell.
Court records later revealed exactly how the exorcisms worked. Sachiko would gather her followers in the main room of her house. The victim, already identified as possessed, would be brought to the center. The Dao drums would start. Deep, resonating sounds. Rhythmic. Hypnotic. Then the chanting would begin. Sachiko would lead. Her followers would join in. The victim would be ordered to confess their sins, to acknowledge the demon inside them. If they refused, the beating started. If they complied, the beating started anyway. Sachiko used 2 thick Dao drumsticks, each one about 2 feet long, solid wood. She'd strike the victim's back, their legs, their arms, over and over, rhythmic, like she was playing an instrument. Because to her, she was. The victim's body was just another drum. The sessions lasted hours, sometimes days. When the victim lost consciousness, Sachiko would declare the demon was weakening. When they woke up screaming, she'd say the demon was fighting back. When they begged for mercy, she'd say the demon was trying to manipulate her. There was no winning, no escape. And Sachiko wasn't alone in this. Her 23-year-old daughter Yuko participated, struck the victims herself. A 45-year-old follower named Mitsuoin helped hold people down. But the most dedicated assistant was Hiroshi Namoto, 21 years old, young enough to be Sachiko's son. He was her lover, and he'd do anything to please her, including murder. Hiroshi would beat victims for hours without stopping. His arms would get tired. He'd switch hands, keep going. I was helping purify them, he'd later tell police. I believed I was doing good. The power of belief, the danger of devotion. The beatings weren't quick, weren't merciful. Mamoru Miki's exorcism lasted 3 days. 3 days of being beaten while his wife and daughter watched. 3 days of begging for it to stop. When he finally died, Sachiko didn't call an ambulance. She declared the demon had been successfully driven out. Then she moved on to his wife. The drums never stopped. Even when someone was dying, the drums kept pounding. Neighbors would later tell police they heard the drums constantly, day and night. Sometimes mixed with other sounds, screaming, crying, begging. But the drums were so loud they couldn't make out the words. And even if they could, they assumed it was just part of the religious ceremony. They had no idea they were hearing people being beaten to death. The Dao drums are traditional Japanese instruments, beautiful, sacred, designed to create music that connects the earthly realm to the divine. Sachiko perverted that, twisted it. She turned instruments of beauty into weapons of torture. And the sound of those drums, the deep, resonating rhythm, became the last thing 6 people heard before they died. How does an ordinary housewife convince people she's God? Sachiko Etto was born on August 21st, 1947, in Sukagawa, Japan. Completely unremarkable childhood. No abuse, no trauma, just ordinary. She married her high school sweetheart, a painter. They had 3 daughters. For decades, she was nobody special. She sold cosmetics, raised her kids, lived a normal life. Then, in 1990, everything changed. Her husband injured his back, couldn't work, couldn't paint. Instead of recovering, he discovered gambling. Not casual gambling, the kind that becomes an addiction. They'd built a new home. Now they were drowning in debt. Desperate, they turned to religion, specifically to a Shinto-linked organization called Agonshu that practiced spiritual faith healing. For a while, it helped, gave them hope, purpose. Then, Sachiko and her husband decided to start their own version, without permission. When headquarters found out, they were kicked out. Then, in 1992, Sachiko's husband vanished, just disappeared. No body was ever found. The official story was that he'd suffered a mental breakdown and wandered off. But there were always whispers, questions, because by the time anyone thought to investigate seriously, Sachiko had already moved on. She relocated, reinvented herself completely. The cosmetic saleswoman became a spiritual healer. The ordinary housewife became a self-proclaimed psychic with the power to cure ailments and drive out demons. And people believed her. She had a gift for reading vulnerability, for identifying exactly what broken people needed to hear. The lonely, the sick, the desperate. They came to her looking for answers, and she gave them a reason to stay. By 1994, Sachiko wasn't just seeing clients. She'd created a full cult. About a dozen core believers and their family members moved into her home. She ruled as absolute spiritual authority. She claimed to be a messenger of God. Some accounts suggest she went further, claiming to be God herself. Her followers believed it. Why wouldn't they? She could see into their souls, identify demons hiding inside them, drive those demons out, or so she claimed. The exorcism started small, chanting, rituals,
the rhythmic pounding of drums. But Sachiko escalated. The drumsticks that were supposed to strike instruments started striking flesh. Because Sachiko had decided that the only way to purify a soul was to destroy the body containing it, to beat the demons out, to literally drum evil from flesh and bone. And here's the truly disturbing part. Even after the bodies started piling up, the followers stayed. 6 corpses rotting in the house, the smell seeping into everything, and still they believed. Still they bowed when Sachiko entered the room, because she'd convinced them the smell was demons leaving the possessed, that the drums needed to keep pounding, that questioning her was inviting evil into their souls. This is the power of cult psychology, the ability of a charismatic leader to completely warp reality. Sachiko didn't need weapons to control people. She had something more powerful. She had their faith, and she weaponized it. When a follower started asking questions about where the Miki family had gone, Sachiko had an answer ready. They've achieved spiritual transcendence. They no longer need their earthly bodies. The follower believed her, even though the bodies were rotting in the next room. When neighbors complained about the smell, Sachiko told her followers it was demons being expelled from the house. They burned more incense, chanted louder, drummed harder, trying to drive out demons that didn't exist, while ignoring the very real corpses decomposing around them. Sachiko had created a closed system, a reality where she was the only source of truth. And in that reality, beating people to death was an act of mercy, a holy service, divine work.
June 1995. One of Sachiko's followers received a beating severe enough that she needed medical attention. When hospital staff saw her injuries, fractured bones, internal bleeding, they asked what happened. The woman told them about exorcisms, about a spiritual leader who drove out demons. Red flags went up. Someone contacted authorities. Police started asking questions. Sachiko's neighbors told them about the constant drum sounds, the smell. By July 5th, police had enough concern to obtain a search warrant. What they found made even veteran investigators stumble backward. 6 decomposing bodies, evidence of prolonged, brutal violence, drumsticks stained with biological matter, and Sachiko Etto herself, calm, unrepentant, still convinced of her own divine authority, even as handcuffs closed around her wrists. The arrest sent shockwaves through Japan, but what made it even more shocking was the timing. Just months earlier, in March 1995, the Om Shinrikyo cult had released sarin gas in Tokyo's subway system. 13 people killed, thousands injured. Japan was already reeling from one cult massacre. Now here was another cult leader, another set of bodies, another reminder that dangerous extremism was flourishing in unexpected corners of Japanese society. The trial began in 2001. Sachiko pleaded not guilty. Her defense attorneys argued she'd been mentally ill, suffering from delusions, operating under diminished capacity. Prosecutors painted a different picture. A woman who'd positioned herself as a deified ruler, who'd used claims of demonic possession as a mechanism to eliminate threats to her power, who'd shown no remorse even after arrest. Court psychiatrists evaluated her. Their conclusion? She wasn't insane. She was a narcissist with delusions of grandeur who'd found vulnerable people to exploit. She knew what she was doing was wrong. She just didn't care. Because in her mind, she was above human morality.
They were possessed, she told the court. I saved their souls. By beating them to death? By purifying them, yes. No remorse, no acknowledgement of the humanity she'd destroyed. On November 16, 2001, the Fukushima District Court sentenced Sachiko Etto to death. Her daughter Yuko, life imprisonment. Mitsuoin, life imprisonment. Her young lover, Hiroshi Namoto, 18 years. The ruling stated her crimes were excessively grave. She'd abused absolute power over vulnerable people, destroyed 6 lives through sustained torture masked as faith, and shown 0 genuine remorse. Sachiko appealed. The Sendai High Court rejected her appeal in 2005. The Supreme Court dismissed it in 2008. She'd become the 10th woman sentenced to death in post-war Japan. She spent 17 years on death row. During that time, according to prison officials, she was quiet, polite, unremarkable. The monster who'd beaten followers to death with drumsticks became an elderly woman who caused no trouble. But she also never expressed remorse, never admitted genuine wrongdoing, never acknowledged the humanity of the 6 people she destroyed. On the morning of September 27, 2012, at age 65, Sachiko Etto was executed by hanging at Miyagi Prison. She was the first woman executed in Japan in 15 years. Her daughter Yuko and Mitsuoin remain in prison, serving life sentences. Hiroshi Namoto served his time and was released. He's out there somewhere, carrying the weight of what he did in the name of devotion. The families of the victims never got adequate answers. The Miki family, Mamoru, Kazuko, and 18-year-old Satoy, came seeking healing. They found only violence. Why did they have to die? There's no answer that makes sense. The house where it happened was demolished, the site cleared. But locals still avoid the area, still tell the story in hushed voices. The drumstick killer, they call her. The woman who claimed God's authority and used it to beat followers to death while drums pounded through the night.
But here's what keeps investigators awake at night. Sachiko Etto wasn't special. She was ordinary, a cosmetics saleswoman, a mother, a wife, completely unremarkable. Until she decided she was God, and people believed her. So here's the question. How many other Sachikos are out there right now? How many spiritual healers in suburban homes? How many self-proclaimed psychics with absolute control over vulnerable people? In Japan alone, there are thousands of small religious groups, unregistered, unregulated, operating out of houses just like Sachiko's. Some are harmless. Meditation groups, prayer circles, study groups. Some aren't. And you'd never know the difference until bodies start piling up. After Sachiko's arrest, Japanese authorities started investigating other small religious groups. What they found was disturbing. Dozens of groups with charismatic leaders claiming divine authority. Followers who'd given up everything: jobs, families, savings, living in communes, isolated from the outside world, subject to spiritual discipline that looked a lot like abuse. Most hadn't killed anyone, yet, but the dynamics were the same. Absolute authority, closed environment, vulnerable followers, all the ingredients Sachiko had used. And it's not just Japan. In the United States, there are an estimated 3,000 to 5,000 cults operating right now. Not religious organizations, cults. Groups with authoritarian leadership, manipulation tactics, and exploitation of members. Some are large, hundreds of followers. Some are small, just a handful of believers in a suburban house. Your neighbor's meditation group, your coworker's spiritual wellness circle, the life coach operating out of a home office down the street. How would you know the difference between legitimate spirituality and dangerous manipulation? How would you know if the yoga instructor claiming to channel divine energy actually believes she's God? You wouldn't. Not until it's too late. After Sachiko's execution, journalists interviewed her former neighbors. "We heard the drums all the time," one said. "We thought she was just very devoted. Sometimes we heard other sounds, crying maybe, but the drums were so loud. We should have known something was wrong, but she seemed so normal." That's the terrifying part. Cult leaders don't look like cult leaders. They don't have wild eyes and speak in tongues. They look like yoga instructors, meditation teachers, life coaches. Your aunt who got really into crystals. Your friend who joined that self-improvement group. They look ordinary until they're not. Sachiko Etto sold cosmetics for 20 years, raised 3 daughters, was a good neighbor. No one saw it coming, because there was nothing to see. The capacity for this kind of evil doesn't announce itself with warning signs. It just waits, quiet and patient, until debt or loss or desperation cracks something open and lets the darkness pour out. Think about the sounds Sachiko's neighbors heard. Drums pounding, day and night, never stopping. Rhythmic, constant, almost meditative. They thought it was religious devotion. It was a murder soundtrack. Right now, somewhere, drums are pounding. In a suburban house, in a rural compound, in an urban apartment. Someone is claiming divine authority. Someone is gathering vulnerable followers. Someone is deciding who's possessed and who's pure. And no one knows. Because the drums sound like prayer until they don't. After Sachiko's case, Japan implemented stricter monitoring of religious groups. But enforcement is difficult because religious freedom is protected, as it should be. But that same freedom allows dangerous groups to operate unchecked. The line between faith and fanaticism is thin, and charismatic leaders know exactly how to walk it. Sachiko Etto is dead. Her followers are in prison or released. The house is demolished. But the dynamics that created her still exist. Right now. In your city. Maybe in your neighborhood. How would you know? You'd hear drums, maybe, chanting. You'd think they're just very spiritual. You'd never imagine what those drums were really being used for. Until police kicked down the door and found the bodies. Sachiko Etto proved something terrifying about human nature. That evil doesn't always look like evil from the outside. Sometimes it looks like a middle-aged woman who sells cosmetics and raises children. Sometimes it hides behind claims of spirituality and healing. Sometimes it waits decades before showing itself, lurking beneath the surface of an ordinary life, until circumstances align and the mask finally drops. And by the time anyone realizes what they're dealing with, 6 people are already dead. Satoy Miki was 18 years old. She should be 47 now, with a career, a family,
grandchildren maybe. Instead, she's been dead for 30 years, beaten to death with drumsticks by a woman claiming divine authority. Her parents died beside her. Her aunt came looking and died too. 3 more people died for reasons that made sense only to Sachiko. Jealousy, money, power, dressed up as demonic possession. The Tao drums that Sachiko used are still manufactured. Beautiful instruments, sacred in Japanese tradition, designed to create music that connects earth to the divine. Sachiko perverted that completely, turned instruments of beauty into weapons of torture. The sound of those drums, deep, resonating, rhythmic, was the last thing 6 people heard. The house where they died is gone. The drums were destroyed. Sachiko was executed. But somewhere, right now, other drums are pounding. In other houses, led by other self-proclaimed prophets. And we won't know about them until it's too late. The warning signs are there, if you know what to look for. Isolation, absolute authority, us versus them mentality, claims of special knowledge or divine power, financial exploitation, emotional manipulation. But even with the warning signs, people still fall into these groups because cult leaders are skilled at finding vulnerability and exploiting it. And vulnerability isn't weakness, it's human. We all want to believe in something, belong to something, matter to something. Cult leaders weaponize that need. Sachiko Etto did exactly that, and 6 people died because of it. The drums have stopped at Sachiko's house, but they're still pounding somewhere else. In a basement, a garage, a back room. Someone is claiming God's authority. Someone is identifying demons in their followers. Someone is reaching for the drumsticks. And the neighbors? They hear the drums. They think it's just religious devotion. They have no idea what's really happening. Not yet. Not until police kick down the door. Sachiko Etto was executed on September 27th, 2012, at Miyagi Prison in Japan. She was 65 years old. Her daughter Yuko Etto and accomplice Mitsuo remain in prison serving life sentences. Hiroshi Namoto, her young lover and accomplice, was released after serving 18 years. The 6 victims, Mamoru Miki, Kazuko Miki, Satoy Miki, Kimiko Sakin, Tatsuo Rai, and Akimi Senzaki, have never been forgotten by their families. If you or someone you know is involved in a group that exhibits cult-like behavior, isolation, financial exploitation, absolute authority, punishment for questioning, please reach out for help. The Cult Education Institute provides resources at culteducation.com. In Japan, contact the National Police Agency's Cult Monitoring Division. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And if you hear drums pounding day and night from your neighbor's house, pay attention. Because it might not be prayer, it might be something much worse.